Hi there. Welcome to Fireside Chat. The title of this one is that when you leave your comfort zone, on the far side of your comfort zone, that's when the magic happens. I believe that life unfolds in three parts, three stages. The first one is 0 to 30. The second one is 30 to 60. And the third 30 is 60 to 90. And a little extra if you happen to be so lucky. I don't know why I've held this story, sort of a magical story, within me for so long. But in my third 30, my memory goes back to adventurous days in the past, and I don't want to die with my music still in me. And so this is the time, I believe, to share the story of dancing with a Saudi prince. I look at my second 30, from 30 to 60, as probably the time of the most bold decisions I ever had to make, the most challenging growth that I ever had to accomplish, and just a time of discovery and bold decisions. The story began to unfold in that period of time when the military decided to uproot our family and move us across the world to the kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We were just getting settled on our compound. There was a small contingency of American military personnel there assigned to a training mission in the southwestern region, the Asir region of Saudi Arabia. And we had just gotten there, and because it was such a small number of military personnel, they put us to coexist and live among Northrop Grumman contractors there in the Middle East. So it was a walled compound, and it had a gate with guards who were there for security at the front gate, and it was enclosed to the American community. We had an American school there. We had a grocery store, post office, beauty shop. It was all contained within those walls. I really found out after living there very briefly that it was not that different than living in the United States until you left those hallowed walls, other than we had no television, no telephones, and women were not allowed to drive. So I kept thinking, how could I go into a country where I'm not even allowed to drive a car? What I did discover as I left my comfort zone, what I called my warm, fuzzy cocoon back in the States, is that it actually was like being a wealthy American. And when I needed to go somewhere downtown or go shopping, I had a driver. It was like having a special driver for you, driving you around in the United States. It was quite enjoyable, as a matter of fact. But we had been on the cantonment, the compound, just long enough that we heard people Twitter about the Northrop chief executive and his wife often having parties where they would introduce new people in the compound to everyone else. And so we got a call, invited to this party, and we just assumed that it was one of the get acquainted parties, and this was our initiation into those hallowed walls and that community. So we went and got dressed in our normal party Western attire and went to the party, fat, dumb, and happy, looking forward to meeting the other folks. Well, we got to the CEO's home, and Frank got caught up at the front door in small talk and greetings and so forth, and I made my way back to the activity that was going on the back patio. And I hadn't been there but a couple of minutes when a teacher from the American school there on the Northrop compound came rushing over to me. I had been asked to substitute in her classroom while she had to make a trip back to the States, and she wanted to discuss what her needs were while she was away. We were in a deep discussion, and I was totally focused on what she was saying when I felt this presence beside me. And I turned to look, and there was this tall, dark, very handsome Saudi man in his traditional attire. And I was shocked that he was standing there. He was so gracious, he did not interrupt the conversation until there was a lull in the conversation. And then he reached over and extended his hand to her and then extended his hand to me. "Hello, I'm Bandar. It's nice to meet you." And hello, Bandar. And then I realized that the teacher, in the midst of that, had disappeared into the crowd, and I was there by myself with this Saudi national. I was very self-conscious because I had studied the customs and what was the good decorum for being a guest in their country, and I knew that I was to be fully covered and clothed. And I was standing there in my Western dress. It was a red, clingy fabric, and it had spaghetti straps, and my shoulders and my arms were completely exposed. And I had nowhere to hide. And all of the things that I heard about and studied and learned about the ugly American abroad, who tend to be arrogant and disrespectful of native culture and customs, maybe not intentionally, but just ignorantly and seeing themselves as sort of the standard. I didn't want to be guilty of that. I didn't want to earn the label, the ugly American. But there I was. And again, nowhere to hide. Actually, Bandar seemed unfazed by it. And he was just gracious. He was composed. He had this confidence about him, kind of a quiet power, and he was very, very disarming. About that time, he asked me, he said, "How long have you been here in my country?" And I was like, 2 weeks, it's around 2 weeks. And he said, "Well, how do you like my country?" Well, about that time, Frank had made his way back to where we were. I was so glad that he showed up. And I immediately turned and said, "Frank, this is, had to search for the name, Bandar. That was a different kind of name for me. And then Bandar, this is my husband, Frank." Well, Frank is a very friendly Texan. And so we began to talk with Bandar. It was just he and us. And he was asking us questions. "How do you like Saudi Arabia? What is your impression of my country? Do you like Kamis Mache?" And we just had a nice conversation at that point. About that time, the host of the party came out and announced that it was time for dinner and they needed to clear the patio. So Bandar graciously told us that he had enjoyed talking to us. He excused himself and he went over and joined another group of Saudi nationals who were standing over in a different circle. We went and sat down for dinner. And we had just started dinner when another guest came rushing over to our table and said, we can't believe that you've been talking to him for so long." And we were like, "Talking to who?" And they said, "Well, don't you know Prince Bandar? The whole party is in his honor." And we were blown away. We had no idea, number one, that there would be Saudi nationals at this party. We thought it was an American get-acquainted party, and we also had no idea there would be royalty there. And on top of that, the unexpected was we had no idea that we were going to be in conversation with a Saudi prince. So that's how our dinner went, is Frank and I sitting there trying to sort of remember things we said, hoping we didn't say anything offensive, and that we were also as gracious to him as he had been to us at this point. After dinner, the host came back out and said it was time to clear everything and it was time to get ready for the dance floor. So that's where part 1 will end, and I'll pick up part 2 in the next Fireside Chat. Cheers.